the weekend. I did do filming during the week of fixing the broken steering boot on the MGB, but after I looked at what I filmed, I thought this is just boring. Just to do with, I took the rack out, changed the boots over. I had to buy some oil to fill it up because I didn't have any EP90, refill it, refit it. The only thing I did that was noteworthy was a bit of a cock up, which is because I took the rack out, I forgot to mark the position of the steering wheel, the U-joint, in relation with the steering rack. So when I put it back together, the steering wheel had moved, so obviously my wheel is now not centered. I just need to take the wheel off, rotate it round on its spline. That's pretty easy, but in order to do that, I need to get the car outside so I can drive it in a straight line, or at least go backwards and forwards in here. But the weather's really bad today, it's horrible, so I haven't had the door open and I haven't been able to move the bikes outside to be able to do that, but I'll get to that soon. I'm just about to start working on my sandblasting cabinet. I got these toggle latches, so the idea is undo all the screws that hold this glass in, because it's a real pain to clean the glass. There's actually plastic sheet that stops the glass getting scratched, but of course that gets scratched, so you have to change it from time to time. And this is screwed in, and it's a real pain to get these screws in and out because you have to do it through the door. Every so often the gloves, the hose clamp that holds those in place onto these plastic bits comes off, and it's a real pain to get those back on. So I'm going to modify this, so instead of being screwed on, it's clamped on. And that's what these little toggle clamps allow you to do. They basically go over center and put a bit of pressure on things, but it's easy to open things up. So that's what I'm going to do next. Obviously I still need to work on the Riley. I need to draw up my pattern. I just want to get MG done and out of the way. Bike is going for a warrant on Monday. Unfortunately the weather looks crappy on Monday, but theoretically if I get the warrant I can then go to the post office and get the registration printed out, and it's fully road legal. I could ride it back home. Waikanae is about a 15-minute drive away. It's an easy ride. It's down a 100km/h road, but it's a nice wide road, so I can stick to the side. People can get past. I'm not going to hold anyone up, but we'll see. So I have been starting the bike. I've been trying to figure out how long do you need to leave it idling for it to warm up. It's about 2 or 3 minutes. So choke to start it, then you can take the choke off almost straight away, and I just leave it running for a bit, and then it warms up enough so that it doesn't bog down when you open the throttle. Yeah, about 3 minutes seems to be all right. And yeah, I need to do the rear guards obviously, but that is going to work. And I seem to remember, this is the problem, it's been so long since I did the front guards and it took me so many attempts. I do now remember when I rolled this edge, I did use the shrinker stretcher to make this stay flat. So that's how I did the other ones. So rolling that curve on it and then stretching the edge to maintain the shape. That's how I did the last lot. So that's what I'll do again on this. But, yeah, it's hard to get motivated on days like this. There's a lot of crap going on at work at the moment as well, which I'm not going to get into, but it sucks the life out of you, let's put it that way. MG is all back together. The rain kind of let up long enough for me to get all the bikes outside, and I was able to reverse the car out up and down the driveway a bit, get the steering centralized, and shuffle the wheel around on its spline. That's no big deal. This isn't an original wheel, and I made this boss, so the way it's attached is the steering wheel bolts to the boss, but underneath the steering wheel I've got a flat plate I machined with a nut welded to the middle of it, and the diameter of that disc is bigger than the diameter of the the middle of the wheel, but obviously smaller than the Boss, so it kind of holds it captive. This ring, which I machined out of a lump of steel and had chrome plated, I think that cost about $50 or $60 back a while ago. Goodness knows how much that would cost now. But it's basically a ring and it's stepped. So the diameter is smaller on the inside, and there's another metal plate with a hole through it. And each of these little holes, plates, has a hole drilled in it, and you can line up the holes and stick a screwdriver or a Allen key or anything through it, and that stops those two metal discs rotating, and then you can screw the first one into the second one and it clamps everything together. The MG badge just simply has a magnet screwed to the back, glued to the back, and it just attaches to that metal plate, holds it all together nicely. So that was nice and simple. I had to degrease and wipe down the steering wheel rim because it was all oily from me doing the rack, having to play with that horrible gear oil and muck everywhere. But that's all cleaned up now. I actually gave it a coat of linseed oil. I might give it another couple and wipe it off. It's a nice grippy sort of finish on it then. The lift makes a massive difference. It's just so good to be able to raise things up and down. Of course, you'd raise it up, do something on the rack, realise you had to come into the car, drop it down, but it worked so well. And these sliding wooden scaffold boards I've got across the middle also work well, because when you're standing up underneath the car and it's up high, it makes a really convenient shelf across the middle. And I had all my tools and bits and pieces on there, so super pleased that I got this, because it just makes it so much easier. Car needs a good wash. It is absolutely filthy, but today's not the day to do that. But hopefully I can take it for a warrant next week. I'll just ring the garage up the road and get that done. So then that's back on the road and ready for summer, if summer ever arrives. So we're in spring now, obviously. The garden is growing like mad. Have to cut the grass at least once, sometimes twice a week. But this is typical Wellington spring, where you'll get a couple of days where it's really nice and you'll think winter's gone, and then it basically turns into this kind of weather from now until about the week after we go back to work. It's typically how it works. So hopefully the weather will start getting better now and we'll start planting some things. But it's quite nice seeing everything growing. There's sort of buds and things on everything. I even found a strawberry in the garden the other day that I ate, which was quite nice. Bike is good. One of the things I've been struggling with on it for a little while is the kickstand, or the center stand. So this doesn't have a kickstand, and that's from the factory. There were certain bikes that did, but if you look at the frame on this, there's no lugs or anything to attach a kickstand. It's a optional extra, and it bolts on somehow. I don't actually know, but there's something different about how it bolts on. Apparently they're super rare, hard to get. But I've been struggling with the center stand and actually pulling it up on the center stand. It's because I've been doing it wrong. So the way it works, it's a bit hard to explain, but you sort of push it down and you stand on this lug and grab the rail here and pull the bike backwards, but you let it sort of, if you just push the center stand down and try and lift it onto it, it doesn't work, or it's very difficult. You kind of have to roll the bike back onto it. It's hard to explain. I saw it in a forum somewhere, the guy mentioned it, and I thought, oh, I'll give that a try. I'm still practicing doing it, but if you get it right, the bike does just literally kind of roll back onto it, which seems a lot easier. So I'll have to get used to that. And thanks to the person who pointed out in the comments what this yellow thing was for. I had no idea. It's to put underneath your side stand to stop it sinking into the ground. So something like that, which is interesting. I didn't know that. yeah, unfortunately I'm reluctant to go out on the bike today. One, because it's wet and rainy and I'm not used to that, but two, because it's still brand new tyres, and I've heard that new tyres on wet road can be a bit of a problem. Same with car tyres. I know you're supposed to take it easy when they're brand new tyres. I don't know how many kilometres, miles I have to do before that's no longer a problem, but I haven't done enough. I know that. I've been to the beach and back. That's probably 4 kilometres. I should have actually taken note of the mileage before I started all of this, and see how many I've actually put on it. I'll have photos of it from when I first got the bike, so I'll know, but you know, it's not going to be huge amounts. The other thing I had ordered was just from AliExpress. You can get little clocks, analog clock that just clips onto there. It should clip onto there. I ordered one and then they cancelled the order and refunded me, so I don't know what's happened there. And the other thing that I might look out for is slightly longer mirrors. So, I mean, these aren't too bad, but I think they're okay. I just need to get used to them and get used to using them. But let's see. The fuel's off, but it should run for a little bit. It's not warm. That's what it does, it just dies. Yep, fuel's off. So we'll see what they say when it goes for a warrant. It should get it. I've gone through it, everything's tight. I might go through it again and make sure everything is bolted up tight. Pretty sure it's okay. The only thing I can't easily adjust here is the headlight positioning. They will test it with a machine, but I'm not quite sure how you're supposed to set it. There's information online for cars. There probably is for motorcycles as well. But I figure if they're going to measure it, they should be able to adjust it for me. Get it where it needs to be. And since I had the bikes out, I've pulled out my sheet of steel so I can start looking at the making the sides of the guards. This is the last of the cold rolled steel I've got. The Riley does look really good in the shed like this when it's not up on the ramp, because the ramp adds, what's that, 6-8 inch height. This is it on the ground. I may shorten that exhaust because that angle might be a little bit low there. If I really need to, I can bend the pipe up and over, well, not over, but up a bit. But I don't have any more. Oh wait, no, maybe I do. What's this? That's quite thick gauge steel. But I've got a lot of this Zintec steel, which is this galv, electrogalv steel. Some of that's quite thin, but I've got the right gauge of that. I'm sure I've got sheets and sheets of that, so I can use that. Ah, here's some more steel. I might have enough. We'll see. I need to, so left on the Riley, rear guards. I need to fit the foot limbs loops for the petrol tank lid. I was trying to remember what I was going to do to seal that, and I think I'm just going to take the cheeks way out and use modern stick-on foam stuff. I'll just stick that on there, that'll work. And you won't be able to see it because it's not like you often take the lid off because it's a pain. And I need to work out the mounting of the fly screen and the mirror, and whether or not It's probably not going to have a passenger fly screen. I like it. Realistically, it's not a car I'm going to be carrying passengers in very often. I think Head Gardener said she'd go in one trip in it. I don't think she's talking about a trip up to Auckland or Smash Palace or anywhere quite that far. I think she probably means to Otaki and back. But mirror will go there. I might make the little aluminium fairing for the mirror. That was quite common back in the day. At this point, it's kind of what look do I want. But I've got another one of these mirrors. These work quite well. Stainless steel, so they won't rust. Yeah, that rev counter definitely completely changed the look of the instrument panel from normal car to, you know, rev counter front and center. It was a race car. So, not that I'm actually going to race it. But, no, it's looking good. I do, from some angles, think I made the tail too long, but that's what they're like. You know, I measured side-on pictures, photos of real cars and modeled it off that, so this is the correct length. Again, there's all sorts of body styles, so there are shorter ones. You know, the thing that worries me is being out on the road and just having someone straight into the back of it, but it's insured. You know, if they do that, they're going to pay. Yeah, I think that's it. I need to probably lift this up so I've got space underneath it to work. It's probably the next thing to do. And you can flip these up so you're not quite walking into a big flat edge at eye height. It's now still a vertical flat edge at eye height, I guess. Those will come off, of course. Oh, poor car is filthy. But, right, back onto things. It's later in the day. 3 minutes. That's how long it takes for this to warm up and the engine not to bog down when you open the throttle. MG's up out of the way. I found my template, cardboard template at least, for the side of the guards, and I've got my steel one. So what I'm going to do is make a new one with the kick up on the ends. But I've been working on my sandblasting cabinet. So I had ordered this LED strip. This stuff's so cheap now. I think it was $35, something like that. And I was going to use it around the hoist, but it didn't work too well for that. It's not really bright enough. So the sandblasting cabinet came with a lamp, but it's an old-fashioned fluorescent tube thing, which just never worked very well. So I replaced it with the LED light, which kind of works, but it's still not great. So, I mean, you can barely see in there. So again, it's really not bright enough. So I'm going to stick with my big LED lamp. This is actually for fish tank, I think. And I have it on the outside of the glass because then it's not going to get all scuffed up on the inside. And that seems to work fine. So you can see what's going on inside there. I took out the main bit of mesh and I've put a different sort of mesh. This is actually from that vegetable greenhouse thing that I've converted into a little small spray booth. So I've got a piece of the mesh from that on half off the sandblaster, and the other half here is open. And the reason I need it open is because I've been using one of these guns in it, one of these top load ones, and oh, I've just got sand everywhere. I find this works better. just better than the sort of suction tube ones that come with them. It's easier to maneuver. It just seems a lot nicer, but you have to keep filling it up with sand. So I took half of the mesh away effectively, because then what I can do is I've got a little plastic container in here, and you can reach down and top that up and then fill up the gun without having to open the door. Still a little bit of a pain in the neck, but I'm only typically sandblasting small things, so it doesn't really matter. I replaced the foam around the door because that was all coming off. I have an extractor on this, so I have one of these cyclone extractors. These are dirt cheap as well, and I hooked my vacuum cleaner to it, so the vacuum is sucking through that, and it sucks out all the dust, and it works really well. So what this has caught is, you can see maybe to about there, is extremely fine sandblasting dust, which I'll need to go and tip on the garden somewhere. And that really improves the cabinet, because then you can see what you're doing. Everything doesn't clog up with dust. So there's my fishing light, and I've put my over center toggle latches on there. That's a piece of plastic which I need to polish, because this gets all scratched. And then you've got glass, and then underneath the glass there's a piece of clear plastic. You can see I just stick it on with masking tape, and usually the tape is enough to stop any dust getting in between the two, but after a while, oh no, you can see that dust is on the outside. You can see there's the original white foam in there, which the glass sits on, and I've just replaced the outer foam with some foam weather strip that kind of holds the glass. This sits on top. Kind of like that. Over time, the foam will get indentations. This is quite tight. You can see it's lifting up the foam. I might loosen it off a bit. I may reinforce the plastic. You can see it's bending, so maybe just put a little wooden frame screwed onto the outside or something. Could probably loosen those off quite a bit. They don't need to be under quite so much tension. The biggest problem or pain in the neck was just removing the old foam and the old glue. So for that I used a filthy old rag and some cum cleaner. That's actually what it's called. Miracle Cum Clean. It's kind of a degreaser, paintbrush cleaner. It's basically solvents. And that worked to get rid of the old glue. And yeah, it works well. I just have a short little lead air hose going to my compressor, and let's see, I can tell it's working well when you can put in a piece of steel angle or something and blast off the mill scale. So no, that cleans it up really nicely. So that's good. There was a little bit of tube I put through it just to see how well it works. So that's good, that's fixed. And again, being able to take the glass off the top just means you can reattach the hose clamps on the gloves. If you lose something down inside there, it's much easier to take this off and get in there to be able to rescue it. Yeah, it's working really well. So I also rigged up the power here. This one is for my ultrasonic. having the switches here up here is good because the main switch is on the back of it, which is a pain in the neck. You have to reach behind it every time you want to turn it on or off. So I'm going to loosen those clamps just a little. And that's really it for today. It's about 5:30 now, so I'll probably go in soon. Sunday, and I'm making the side pieces for the rear guards. I started with my original steel template that I had cut out. This is what I used for the front. It's been living over here for months. And started with that and then modified it to give me the little kick up I need on the rear guards. There's that kick on the front and the back of the rear guards. Traced that out onto a piece of cardboard to do a test piece, which is sitting up there. And then I was able to hold that up against the car, figure out where I want things to be. And you can see initially I had it too long. So I ended up cutting a bit out of the middle and joining it back together. And I went and looked at pictures of proper cars to see how their rear guards are done. And again, it's a matter of pick one you like the look of and vaguely copy it, because no two are the same. But generally, this style of rear guards, it's usually on the cars with the big long swoopy front guards, but it is on the ones with the short guards as well. But it was more about trying to figure out where the ends should lie, and I've kind of gone for kind of in line with the chassis rail and the rear suspension at the back. That seems to be how most of them are. Again, you can't really get this wrong because there is no right. They're all different. So I've been cutting those pieces out. Big bits like this out of a sheet of steel, it's very wasteful. You end up with some very strange shapes. So I was able to get a couple. What I do is I make one that I use as my master, or should that be main? A little computer science humor there. But I use one that I cut out and then I test up against the car, and then I use that as my template to draw around for the others. And I just use a fat Sharpie marker and then trim to the inside of the line, and I use my little flap disc thing to fine tune it to get it right on the line. A millimeter or two difference in the width isn't really going to matter too much. And then to avoid wasting huge amounts of steel, a couple of them are in two pieces. So you can see I made them deliberately different lengths. I didn't split it in the middle, just so I know which half goes to which half. And I figure, well, the guard is made of pieces of steel welded together anyway. If I have to weld pieces to make the pieces, that's fine. So these will just be welded like that, all smoothed off, and then I'll have my 4 side pieces that I can then run through the bead roller. I'm using my electric shears to cut these, and then what I find is that'll put a twist on the metal, so you do have to run it through the slip rollers, which are going rusty again. I only just cleaned those, to get them more or less flat. And then obviously when you run them through the bead roller to put that edge on the top surface, again, that's going to warp everything. But what I'm going to do is spend time on the shrinker stretcher to get these flat and nice, because the better you can get the fit before the welding, the better. The better in the long run. I may spray these down with some phosphoric acid just to get the surface rust off them, but I think that'll be the next job, is weld my pieces together to make longer pieces. And then I need to cut the long strip that goes over the top, and again I need to make sure I get the dimensions of that correct, unlike one of the other times when I had to cut, I made it too wide and had to cut the middle and join the two halves together, which was really annoying. Gives me an extra weld seam to clean up. and you can never get them perfect. But I mostly minimise the amount of scrap, which is good. So a bit of clean up and then some welding, I guess. These guard sides are now welded together. My welding still isn't great. I always end up with low spots in my welds. Even though the welds are decent and got full penetration, I suspect I need to use a little bit more filler. I'm using Kyle's trick of using the welding wire. The MIG welding wire is my filler rod, and I think he even mentions this in one of his films. He uses a couple of strands twisted together, and what I'm finding is if I use one, it's not quite enough. If I use 1/16 normal TIG welding rod, it's too much. So I think that's where his two strands twisted together comes from. It must give just the right amount of filler that you don't get undercutting and you can grind it back. But those will be okay. If it needs a little skimmer filler, the whole thing will anyway, so that's fine. And I've run them through the bead roller and put that curve on the edge. So when I do the top piece, I'll of course curve that way, and then you weld the two edges together. It still needs hammering. It doesn't get it to fully 45. I think it should be pretty close, but these have all come out okay, and they didn't twist. So when I did the front guards and did this edge, what ended up happening is they ended up all wobbly. These ones didn't, and I'm guessing it's because I've got this kind of reverse curve in it that's stopping it twisting. So that's quite interesting. Just the way the metal behaves because of the way that it's folded and bent and stretched and shrunk. That's what all the skill in this sort of sheet metal work, that's where it comes from, is understanding that, I think. And you know, it just takes lots and lots of practice to get a good feel of what the metal's going to do when you do something to the metal. And you know, I'm an amateur, so I don't have enough practice. I'll never be able to do enough as my hobby, I think, to really get a good feel for it. So this should be good enough though. I think that'll be fine. And this is also where having a bead roller that's motorized really comes in handy. So if you've just got a handle here, you have to do everything from this angle, and it's quite hard fitting something that's big and curved through standing to the side of it. So to do these pieces, I find it easier to stand like this, and then I can operate the bead roller and have the piece curving around like this. I can look straight down on it. And that works a lot better. I've talked about this before. Really simple motorized setup. It's literally a windscreen wiper motor and some child's bicycle chain and sprockets. That's all it took. You don't need a massive motor. There's quite a bit of torque in these because you've got the worm drive in there. They're geared down so far. You know, there's a lot of torque multiplication. And I've got an electronic speed controller on this, and I basically never need to use that. So this is at the fastest speed, but I can turn that down to almost nothing. There's also 2 speeds available on these wiper motors, depending on which windings you use. And I just power it from an old 12 volt. I think this was actually, I think I got this from Weta. They were throwing them out. They were like UPS backup power supply batteries that they replaced over a given after a certain amount of time, even if the batteries were good. So I snagged that from the rubbish pile. Unfortunately, this strip of steel going across that way isn't long enough to make the piece that goes along there. So what I need to do is dig out. I've rolled this back so I could see the guard next to the wheel. So what I'll need to do is dig out my, unless this is one. No, that's not going to be long enough either. I need a full sheet to get the width across it. So it looks like I've got quite a bit of that Syntec there. wonder what that one is. Need to get my calipers and actually measure that. These don't look too bad. This looks a bit twisted. Good enough. So I think that's all I'm going to do for the day, actually. I might have a quick vacuum in here. Obviously leaves and things are blown in. And I'm going to text my neighbour to make sure he hasn't forgotten we're meant to be dropping this off tomorrow for its warrant of fitness. I did start it up again today, and I timed it again, and yes, 3 minutes seems to be a good amount of time to leave it idling. Then it's warmed up, then it doesn't bog down at all when you open the throttle. So that's handy to know.